Facebook Live webinar. We'll take just a minute to kind of let all of us gather in here. And I don't know about where you live, but in the Midwest, spring seems to be upon us. Everything is blooming out, which seems kind of absurd here in February. But spring is certainly near in the future. And spring is, of course, one of those seasons when the visitor count for a local church increases. And I think it's important that we get ourselves ready for those visitors that are going to be coming. And I think it's also important that we be ready to follow up on those who are going to come in. That's not our immediate discussion tonight. We're going to continue the discussion about caring for new converts. And it's a tragic and unfortunate thing that many converts do not become disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ. And there is a difference between those two things. A disciple is one who learns. There are three different distinct things that Jesus indicates are characteristics of a disciple. I'll let you go and study those out from the book of John. But there are any number of reasons that people fail to mature. They fail to become that learner, that one who is a disciple. But we're going to discuss one specific area that I think is probably the most challenging of all of the things that have to be overcome if we're going to be effective as a disciple-making church. Hello, I'm Carlton Coon. My wife, Norma, and I pastor Calvary in Springfield, Missouri. We're blessed to do so. We have been involved in growing three churches, primarily through conversion and then maturing those converts into disciples of Christ. And I talk about disciple making a lot. I've written about disciple making. I've done quite a number of seminars about disciple making. And there are three different Bible analogies that I use to talk about why spiritual babies do not survive. The first is found in the 38th chapter of the book of Job, which talks about the ostrich. And the overriding premise there is the ostrich has no maternal instinct whatsoever. She just lays her eggs in the dust, unconcerned about what might destroy the eggs that she has laid. And that's an unfortunate thing. No maternal instinct whatsoever. The second, it's what we focused on back in January, and it's available here on Facebook and also on my website, is the question of Mephibosheth's nurse. Mephibosheth, of course, was a descendant of Jonathan, a son of Jonathan, and his nurse became frightened at the army of David that was encroaching on the great city. And so she ran quickly, and she dropped her charge. She was the caregiver. She was the one. And sometimes we get in a hurry with our new babies, and we drop them, and we forever injure them. The third is illustrated by where Herod and Pharaoh were each threatened by a new baby. Their remedy, within the context of their historical moment, was to kill all the babies, all the male babies at least. And I'm going to use this to discuss what I call the sociological challenges of adding new people to the church. In both behavior and attitude, a church can have posted a figurative keep out sign. And of course, that keep out is never verbalized, but it is presented in an attitude. It becomes an attitude and a spirit of our church. This is our church, and any who are going to be added are somehow they are coming into our church, and they are it's almost like they're attacking our church. And that's an unfortunate thing, and probably a little bit too simplistic a representation. Now, what I want to try to accomplish, and I realize we have a wide array of people. There are folks who committed to being here with us that are from Australia, others from the Philippines, several churches in Canada. One pastor in Canada has his entire congregation. This is their midweek service. They're joining us, and this is part of their midweek service. So I honor that, and I want to communicate some things that I think can be helpful, and it's my prayer that we can become effective at keeping our new converts. So that's the first thing. Learn to focus on new converts. You don't have to do exactly the things that I do. You don't have to use the resources that I use, But I'll say this, if you're going to keep your newcomers, you got to do something. And you can't just leave it to whim or fancy or hope, because it doesn't work. You're going to lose 95% of the people who you baptize and who receive the Holy Ghost if you do not have an intentional strategy to retain your converts. Okay? The second thing that I'm going to try to do is to define some of the attitudes and the behavior by which we kill the babies. And my thought is this: if we can know the problem and if we can identify the problem, then we can move toward fixing the problem. And then thirdly, I want to share an exciting opportunity to explore some of the resources that I have developed through the years, and these may be able to change your culture and help you put the right priority on maturing your spiritual babies using some of the things that I've developed. And then finally, at the end of our time together, I will respond to some of your questions. And I won't be able to answer all of them, never have been able to. But I will respond to all of those on Facebook Live even after our session is over. And I will also, if it's confidential, I'll just email you a response. So look at my email address. It's there above or below the screen that you're looking at, carltoncoonsenior.com. And it's a place that you can go and learn more about some of the things that we have used and that others have used to be effective in taking care of new converts. So we're going to talk about sociological factors that can destroy your new converts. Now that sounds like a wonderful college course, but let's try to simplify it. Sociology is the study of cultural units. A cultural unit can be a family, a tribe, or a particular club or organization. A sociological cultural unit would also include a church. And sociological research examines how the people within that cultural unit interact with each other. And then the second component of the research is to consider how that cultural unit relates to those who are outside their unit. So our consideration of sociological factors in disciple making is somewhat simple, but the implications of not getting this right in your local church are simply huge. So if we just set aside all the big words and all of the scientific mumbo jumbo perhaps, and we can think about how welcoming your church is to new people. Herod and Pharaoh's response to the birth of a promised child seems a little bit extreme. Both of those gentlemen were put at risk by a new baby. And so these two influential leaders simply destroyed all the male newborns. And the reason they did this is because that Herod and Pharaoh were both frightened by the prospect of these new additions into their very comfortable kingdom. Sociological implications of new people coming into the church. So the hook that I would toss out for you to think about here is this: does our attitude and our behavior toward newcomers cause them to want to be part of us? There's some things you need to think about. First of all, the median church of every denomination, the median size of churches of every denomination in North America is around 75. Now, a group of 75 people is just a little bit larger than a social unit that is described as a single cell unit. And in a single cell, everybody knows everybody. And when I say they know them, they don't just know their name. They know all their kids' birthdays. They may know the dog's name. They may know the kids' pet's name. They may know the fish's name. There is a closeness, there is an intimacy about a single cell group that simply cannot be demonstrated whenever you have 300 or 400 people in a group. So in a single cell, everybody knows everybody. And in most instances, they know each other intimately. And that describes where most of our churches are. That describes where the vast majority of congregations are at. And then to add to that, in many cases, those 75 people are primarily made up of one or two or three key families. And so the symptoms of this single cell dynamic look something like this. Number one, we know each other, but you're the new person. We don't know you. And so while there is a consistent friendliness among their peers and among the people that they know, there is not a similar welcoming attitude towards strangers who come to church. You see it in tight, forced smiles that are quite a contrast to open arms that are simply welcoming to everybody who walks in the door. You hear it or you observe it, let me put it like this, people walk right on by the new people in a hurry to speak to someone who they already know well. And so few people within the church say to a newcomer, I'm glad you're here today. Thank you for coming. When somebody is baptized, they tend not to say, man, I'm so glad you were baptized in Jesus' name today. Your sins were washed clean. You're going to be a great addition to our church. And then finally, conversations in this single cell group tend to happen in small groups that exclude newcomers rather than welcome them. It's like that we're kind of a social group where that we speak our own language. So if I could use this to kind of portray what I'm trying to describe, it's like that your family has Thanksgiving every year and you're very comfortable and you got grandma's dressing there and all the pies and everybody knows everybody, and you have jokes that are your personal jokes and it's such an enjoyable thing. And then some young guy in the group, he decides to bring a couple of friends, or maybe he brings a girlfriend, or maybe some family that's disconnected decides to come. And suddenly that single cell group of Thanksgiving dinner is thrown out of its comfort zone by the new people, and everything is strained. Well, that's what happens when a church is kind of single cell minded. Okay, the second social dynamic is what I call a closed set. Now, I realize that I'm borrowing a math term, but it fits. A closed set is a church where people are so linked together that there is no room for newcomers to be part of the set. It's like a closed set would be like the magnet that is turned to repulse instead of to attract. Now, there's no church and nobody that I am talking to who, if you were to survey your people, they would say, oh, we're a closed set church. That's not something we self-identify at all. But here's some indicators of a closed set church. Number one, it takes a long time, and there is no certain path for a newcomer to find a place to be active in the church. The standards of behavior and Christian excellence are so high that dirty diapers are not permitted in this family. And the unfortunate reality is that no baby can be healthy, no baby can survive in that particular environment. The second dynamic in a closed set is that new people who are not like the existing group are not desired. Now again, we would never verbalize that, but we like what is called homogeneous groups. We like to be part of groups who are like us. And so we're what we are. Now, that group may be very different. It may be a group that is totally African American. It may be a group that is totally Jamaican. It may be a group that is totally Filipino. It may be a group that's totally Caucasian. It can be a church group that's made up primarily of people who are not particularly well educated, who do not dress too well, who are not particularly engaged in furthering themselves through education. All of those things can be cultural portrayals of a particular group of people. So here comes this person, and our church, if I could use it as an example, perhaps we are made up of folks who are largely college educated or have some degree of college. Okay, this person comes in, they're not well educated, and so we repulse them. We don't attract them. We're a closed set to them. They can be too poor. They can be too well dressed. They can be the wrong color of skin. The cultural background can be different. Their past can be too ugly. So it's that dynamic of not welcoming people who are not like us. The third thing that I see in this closed set business is where we use church words and vocabulary. And it can be as simple as one person in the audience being Brother John, while another guest or another person in the same group, because they are a guest or because they're a new convert, is just John. Okay? Now, when you make that distinction, it tends to repel the person who is not part of the club. Brother John's part of the club, but John, he's not part of the club. And so he does not have the brother in front of his name. Now, we'd like to think that, well, that'll inspire this other fella to become Brother John too, but that's not the way it works. That's not the way social dynamics happen with us. Instead, the fella who we just call John feels excluded. So perhaps a better solution is to simply not call Brother John, but let both of them be called John. Okay, third factor in this business of sociological issues is territorialism. Herod was not concerned that another Jewish baby was born. But when the question was asked by those wise men, where is he that is born king of the Jews? That's a different issue, because that new addition was a direct threat to Herod's very comfortable position, one that his family had held for some generations preceding him. Territorialism. Territorialism. I want you to think about territorialism. The characteristics would be the people who feel that their place or the place of their children in their church is somehow threatened. I've been playing music, or I've been Sunday school superintendent, or my kids have always sung the solos. They've always had the lead parts. And the new person coming in, their kids may be better at music, and they may sing better solos, and they may be better on the music. And then there is the issue of we've always been really close to the pastor, and these new folks, they're taking so much of his time. And besides that, we always went fishing with Brother Louis, and now he's got this new fella who's going fishing with him instead. And so there is an encroachment on our territory. I think it's also defined by when every leadership role in the church is held by someone who has been in the church more than 5 years. That indicates that we're not particularly open to breaking out and expanding the influencers within the church. Okay, fourth characteristic is that the church, and this isn't true just of any local church, but this is true of the church universal and in varying degrees in almost all local churches, and we preachers struggle with this at times. It's the struggle with this me first attitude. It's what Israel became. They wanted to be blessed, but they didn't see themselves as priests to the nation. They just wanted the blessing. They wanted to be able to say, we have Abraham to our fathers. And the symptoms of this me first, it almost shows up in a song that we sing sometimes. I've heard it at various events. I've come to get my blessing. I've come to get my blessing. Doesn't matter whether you get a blessing or not. I've come to get my blessing. It's almost self-absorbed. And the symptoms of this idea of me first can be verbal, and it can also be an attitude. It can be, I've given money, I've paid the bills, I've been faithful in attendance. And do you mean, Pastor, that the priority for our church is to reach new people and disciple them? Those people who have never given a dime to this church. Some years ago, I had a lady who said to me, she was relatively new to our church, she had relocated from somewhere else, and she said, Pastor, you are too focused on developing new people, I'm going to go somewhere else. She did. And in some instances, that sort of departure is the only way to get a reset. And so moving from this me first, which is a defensive posture, it's almost as though there's not adequate blessing to go around if I don't get mine, to being on the offense in welcoming new people and welcoming disciples can be something of a struggle. Don't misunderstand. Now, I don't want any leader to go and become arrogant or presumptuous in any of this. You can't make the decisions for someone else, but what you can do is you can teach and preach and act the principles of these new converts or the priority of the church. If you do that, there will be people almost certainly who decide this is no longer what I want to be part of, and that's okay with me. I never like to lose anybody, but as a pastor, I want to choose who I lose. And if it's the choice between losing a new convert and losing somebody that's been around the church for a long time, who has a me first, who has a spiritual welfare mentality, if I could use that expression, I would prefer to lose the person who has the me first attitude. Because my understanding of the idea here is that we are to disciple new people. That is the work product of the New Testament church, that it's what we're to do. Now, I know that there are likely some other sociological dynamics, but these are more than I can adequately address today. The single-cell church, closed sets, territorialism, and me first. So now the question that we have identified some of this is, how do we overcome sociological issues? And some of the answers I've already offered. But you have to be clear that this is the priority, and then you have to move toward that priority. And so from the scripture, I want to give you some broad principles, and then I want to give you some approaches to applying these. The first thing is this. I think for whatever your church is, if you're a home missionary and you had 8 people with you Sunday, talk about what the church is going to become. Pastor as though you're pastoring 25. Have church as though there are 25 there. And always be talking to the church about the next thing. If there are 20 in church, then talk about 40 or 50. If there are 50, then talk about 75. If there's 75, talk about 100. We're never going to get comfortable just doing maintenance and having the same number of folks here all the time. We're going to be reaching for another level. Okay, so that's the first thing. Always be talking about what you're going to become and indicate to the congregation, I'm going to need your help to accomplish this. Okay, the second thing, Pastor, is you have to model the way. You have to be seen as investing in the lost and in those who are becoming disciples. Jesus' time that he spent with that woman by the Samaritan well, I think astounded his most intimate associates into silence. I think you need to be seen in a similar light, that your investment in newbies is something that your people say, wow, you know, he's really serious about this. It was a common criticism of Jesus. He eats with publicans and sinners. Is that a criticism that can be leveled at you? Is that a criticism that can be leveled at me? Existing church members have to see me involved with newcomers to the church. It has to be more than a handshake at the door. It can be taking a new person to lunch on Sunday. It can be letting it slip out in conversation about meeting some new convert at a barbecue restaurant on Tuesday of last week. You have to model what you want your people to do and the behavior that you want them to express. So you're showing people how to get it done. Okay? Now, the third thing here is that you have to teach your church that disciple making is the mandate of the church body. Study everything that Jesus said after his resurrection. The takeaway will be that the apostles in the church were to make disciples. So your Sunday school your youth ministry, your ladies ministry, every ministry within the church body has to be focused on evangelism and disciple making. Nothing gets to just maintain. Now, teaching that concept is okay and necessary, but here's what I want to really try to pound in the nail right here. You can teach that, but if you don't have a plan to carry it out, then it's not going to happen. You have to have a strategy. I'm getting ahead of myself, but one of the early books that I wrote probably 20 years ago was The How and Why of New Convert Care, and it's available as an ebook download. We're actually going to make it on sale for $5.99 tonight. But that book will tell you some things that you need to do, and then it will tell you why you need to do those things to help you keep newcomers. It gives you a plan. It gives you a strategy to carry out the idea. So you have to teach it, but fellas, ladies, you got to teach toward application. So how can this be something that really takes? And some of these are broad and they will affect any number of areas. First thing that I think is very simple is use what I call the 3-minute rule. At the end of most of our church services, I will say to our church family, spend the next 3 minutes getting acquainted with someone that you do not know or do not know well. Does everybody do it? Of course not. But those who care about where we're going, they tend to take me up on it. The other thing it does is it gives me time to escape from behind the pulpit and an opportunity to go to newcomers, which immediately indicates to our church body that I'm pretty serious about new people as a highly visible priority. So the 3-minute rule. Okay, the second thing that I encourage is that you put a priority on disciple-making classes that feed newcomers at their level of understanding. And I encourage you, if you're at a medium-sized church or smaller, and for some, ours is just a bit beyond median at this point, but I encourage you to be involved in teaching this yourself. I've taught Bear Fruit on Sunday afternoons for the last 2 groups. What that means for me is on Sunday, when I've been doing that, I have 4 services on Sunday. Teach Sunday morning, preach Sunday morning. I teach at 4:30, and then I preach at 6 o'clock. Does that make for a long day? Sure, it makes for a long day. But you have to put the priority on the new folks. I've actually had someone, and will again in the future, have someone teach a much larger group while I taught a Take Root or Bear Fruit class. What you're doing when you do this is you're communicating to the church body that this is the entire church's priority. It also is the way you're going to shape the future of the church. Okay, third thing, schedule opportunities to celebrate progress. What gets honored in your local church is going to move up in significance. On a quarterly basis, we welcome newcomers with baptismal and Holy Ghost certificates. Every person comes up front, and after we give these newcomers their certificates, the church body comes by and we give them the right hand of fellowship, welcoming these people to the church. It also puts some pressure on me and on us as a church that we want to have some new people being added to the church. I look forward to the time when we are doing this on a monthly basis. We also do celebrations with discipleship class graduations. So you finish Take Root, that's 10 lessons. We have a Sunday morning time where that we call them up, the graduates, we give certificates, we give them a gift. Pam Eddings, who is our director of New Convert Care or Disciple Making, does an excellent job with that. You don't have to do it all yourself. Now, if you're a church planner, obviously you do. But people are prompted to applaud and to cheer about it. And then the fourth thing, pastors, is this. You have to fight in defense of your spiritual babies. Moses' mother did not let Herod's insecurity destroy her baby. She did everything that she could to save her child. She hid him away just as long as she could. And when he could no longer safely be hidden, she shaped a basket for her baby and she set her daughter to watch. Do the same thing. Fight for your spiritual babies. The future of the church is in your new converts. The future is in those young people that are being converted right now. Fight for them. Invest energy in your new converts. Protect them. If you see somebody not being kind, do your part to defend them. This is important. You got to do it. Evangelist Samuel Chadwick, who was from a far different era, but he blamed himself for letting some new converts get in a church which was cold and apathetic about caring for them. And Chadwick's self-indictment was this: it was like putting a new baby in the arms of a corpse. Please, please, get this thing warmed up. Get this thing warmed up. You see, many of the things that beget children for the murderer, where that we're putting the new baby in the arms of the corpse, those are sociological in nature. You can overcome those intentional behaviors, and you can establish right priorities. Don't diminish anybody. Try to get every saint to come along with you on the journey to becoming a disciple-making church. But if they don't, go ahead and become a disciple-making church anyway. Now, while questions come in over the next few minutes, I do have an exciting opportunity for you to explore some of the resources that I've developed and have proven for over 2 decades to work with making disciples. I've got 2 things for you to consider. The first is my Not an Ostrich packet. That's everything that I've written or developed having to do with disciple making. Our first level of new convert care is Take Root. Second level is Bear Fruit. And then we do a third level, Fitly Framed. So our new converts, when they come in, they're not rushed. There are 27 lessons that we teach to our new converts. So this is basically the packet of stuff. Fitly Framed will make something that you download. But this is a book that I'm extremely excited about. It is the book You Wouldn't Want an Ostrich for Your Mama. And it really deals with all of the things that I've talked about, not just in this session, but in the others having to do with new convert care. I also have the practical book, The How and Why of New Convert Care. It really works. And then you will get teacher and student editions of Take Root and Bear Fruit. This really works. You'll also get my book, The Daily Things of Christian Living. And if you order by midnight tonight, I'll actually send you a free copy of my book that's $16, The Questions Pentecostal Preachers Ask. Now, it may be that you're just dabbling when you convert care as a target. You can get my ebook, The How and Why of New Convert Care, for only $5.99. It's never been any cheaper than that. All of my stuff's guaranteed. If you get the Not an Ostrich packet at 20% off and you're not happy with it, all is refunded. So again, CarltonCoonsSenior.com is your site, and the Not an Ostrich packet, 20% discount available between now and Saturday. There is a deadline on that, and a deadline on the additional free gift. And then the How and Why of New Convert Care is $5.99 until Saturday. And again, guaranteed on anything. Okay, questions. There are always questions that people have regarding how do we better take care of new converts. Now, one of the ones that has come in is the question, okay, when a long-term member of the church brings up particular lifestyle disciplines to newcomers with the expectation that the spiritual newborn apply those immediately, what do? And of course, this has to do with some disciplines regarding lifestyle and holiness and living a righteous life. Well, that's going to happen at times, and I would make this observation. You hope you get to be aware of this situation before it destroys the newcomer. So there's a couple of things you can do and need to do with this, because if you don't do some of this, it'll repeat itself. Number one, you better put on your coaching cap and go coach that long-time member and explain to them that this new believer is not yet ready to hear and receive and to apply those things. And so I then also tell this newcomer to the church that what they're told is a bit out of sequence in the order of their learning about serving God. And so I'll get some shots perhaps, but I just tell them at that point that your holiness is provided by God. You will have a holiness that is imparted to you. And at this point in time, don't concern yourselves with those particular things just yet. Almost invariably, I will have a newcomer who will say, but wait a minute, I'm interested in learning more about that. I'd like to understand. And when they do that, I get them Brother Bernard's book on practical holiness. Okay, but you've got to be sure that you kind of begin to weed that process out, because eventually this will happen and you don't ever hear about it. And suddenly that newcomer is just not there. And that's an unfortunate thing. Okay. The second question that is posed is there anything that you've seen work to encourage existing saints to really connect, to break barriers between themselves and new people? Well, the bottom line is social interaction. I saw a picture of some of our relative new converts at a restaurant with some longtime saints. And those settings of just being out, whether it's at Wendy's or Pizza House or whatever, break barriers of fear. They get people on a level playing field. It's hard to do that on the church property. Okay? Now that sounds strange, but you almost got to push people into some kind of social environment. We had a deal sometime back around the holidays where that a bunch of our men, as part of it, this wasn't the main thrust of it, but they got to playing chess. And we learned more about each other in reality playing chess than we would have learned simply from from church interaction. So encourage that. We also have had good success through the years. Our home is not currently where we can do what I'm about to describe, but eventually we bring a group of newcomers to our church, to our home, and we do this along with a handful of key existing saints. Now, you have to set this up right. You're not just bringing a bunch of people to your house, Pastor. You have got to let those long-time members know that the reason they've been invited is not to get in their little comfort zone and visit with their friends, but that they're there to connect with new people. So I would coach them. And if I saw it not working exactly right, I'd kind of go in and I'd break people up and kind of get them to go talk with new folks. I also would encourage our new people that they were not to guide the conversation to talking about themselves, but they were to ask the other person's story and try to learn all that they could about their life. You see, people are ultimately interested in themselves. They're interested in their children. They're interested in their grandchildren. They're interested in their education. They're interested in their pets. And if you'll give them a chance to talk about their stuff, their hobbies, etc., then you're well on the way to creating that right relationship. Okay. Third question, I think this is the last one I'll have time for, and again, I'll respond to any others online. Involving people and keeping them seems to be a key part involving them seems to be a key part of really connecting them and holding them. So how do you involve people? And this is a great question. How do you involve people who are not yet living a particularly godly life? Well, you do so carefully, obviously. But there are three areas at Calvary that require a level of Christian maturity and discipline. First is our platform team. Secondly, those who are going to teach our children. And thirdly, those who are in leadership of various ministries. We have relative newcomers involved in everything that we possibly can beyond that. We have them involved in hospitality. If you visit us Sunday, there will be some people who might welcome you, who you'd say, well, they really are new to the church, or maybe Brother Coon don't believe much of anything. But the truth of the matter is that you have to involve them. You have to get them participating. I'd welcome their participation in Calvary's media team. In a different pastorate, I drove up one day and we were using volunteers to take care of the church lawn. By the way, that's a great way to involve people, is through cleaning the church and taking care of the church grounds. Well, this lady who had volunteered, and she was actually professional at this particular area of life, she was dressed in a way. I mean, she had on halter top and shorts, and I sat in my car and I thought, wow, what do we do about this? And as I sat there, I watched her pushing that mower across that lawn, and I became so thankful that I wasn't the fellow pushing it. And I became so appreciative that this new convert, who didn't know much yet about what she should or shouldn't be doing, was out there taking care of this particular area of ministry. I didn't do it right then, but later I had a little conversation with her, just reflecting about modesty, and she apologized. She said, I should have thought of that. I know what we stand for. You get people involved, you give them an opportunity to serve. It could be going on visitation, doing follow-up work, doing bus route work. All of these things are places to get folks involved. So other questions I'll answer with a reply here, or I'll answer by email. If any of you have something that I can help with, email me at carltoncoonsenior@gmail.com. I reiterate the opportunity to you who have been part of tonight's webinar, my Not an Ostrich Church Packet. This stuff is available at a 20% discount on the carltoncoonsenior.com website. And if you're just dabbling in this and thinking about how can we do better at this, get the How and Why of New Convert Care. Get it digitally. It's only $5.99. It has 12 letters that I would use to send to new converts, other things, they're very specific in detail, and it talks about why we did them. Both of those are good until Saturday. If you make the order for the Not an Ostrich packet by midnight, I'll also be sending you my book, Questions Pentecostal Preachers Ask. I'm in your corner. Don't let Pharaoh destroy Moses. Oh, and let me calendar my next webinar. It'll be the last Tuesday in March. I also encourage you to read my little article, my column, that is now in Perspectives magazine each week. If you don't get the hard copy, go online to the IBC and look at Perspectives. All right? I'll see you a month from now, last Tuesday in March, 7:30 Central Standard Time. God bless. Let's have revival.